want to play this clip. This is really disturbing. So this guy, Brandon Bernard, he was, I believe it was 18. He was 40 as of yesterday. So 22 years ago, he was involved in I think it was a car hijacking and the murder of two people who were carjacked. He was with 4 or 5 other kids, 18-year-olds. All right, we'll call them not kids, men. And he was not directly involved in the actual killing of these people. There was also a huge amount of evidence that he did not get a fair trial. There was also something like 5 out of the 9 surviving jurors said that if they were told what the prosecution had disallowed or had prevented or failed to introduce in terms of like his role in this group of kids, this gang, I think it was, they would not have on the sentencing at the sentencing stage recommended execution.
It was mostly an all-white jury, and also what the prosecution tried to portray was that he set a car on fire with the couple inside, which evidence showed later, no.
He did not. Now, and there has been a federal moratorium on killing people for much of those 18 years. I think it actually has been like 14 years. So he went to prison like 2003, and I think the moratorium was like shortly after that. So he has been essentially on death row. And President Trump and Bill Barr in July lifted the federal moratorium on murdering people, what they call capital punishment. And there have been 9 people, including Brandon Bernard, who was killed last night by
and
lethal injection.
They're rushing it in. More to come. They're rushing it in at the end of the year.
Here's a clip of him in the Indiana penitentiary.
I'm locked up in my room 23 hours a day. And that's been the case for 17 years. I have learned to entertain myself, to keep myself motivated in here. And I've done all kinds of things. I read a lot. And I do crochet blankets and scarves, and I do hats, all kinds of things. It feels good to create something. I practice the guitar. I feel like I'm getting better, but that's up for debate. But I keep doing it. And I write, and it's just, I've taken a couple of college courses, writing course and stuff like that, in order to just motivate myself to just change. You know, I don't have to be stagnant because I'm in here. I can always improve on myself. Maybe not as much as people in the world can, but still, there's an opportunity to improve yourself. And for that, I have to take it. For those that believe in me out in the world and for myself. And in being in here, one thing I've learned is that I have to do things for myself. When you try to do things for others, to try to appease others, it's not natural. And I feel like I've learned that these improvements I need to do for myself. So then they hold and they stand through the test of time.
He was executed last night by the federal government. And look, even if there's a tremendous, this is a tremendous miscarriage of justice based upon his role in these killings and the life he has led for the past, or had led for the past 17 years in prison, and based upon the discrepancies in the trial. But even putting that aside, there should be no ability by the state, and by that I mean states or the federal government, to kill people in a calculated, cold manner in this way. I mean, I only am qualifying it in that sense that I think like the question of war is a different question. But in this instance, it is murder. It is by every definition, except for the fact that the state is doing it. It is murder. There is an intent. There is, it's not in the heat of passion. It is a clear and calculated murder. And the problem is, in my mind, aside from it being incredibly unjust in this instance and others, and aside from the fact that we know that we've killed people who are innocent in the past, and that it's almost impossible to avoid killing innocent people when you have a when you murder people, you can't go backwards. They're dead. The idea that when the state says there are circumstances which validate the taking of a person's life, then it's just up to negotiation. You're basically saying to someone who wants to murder someone else, it really isn't so much that the murder is wrong. It's the reasons. You need to have a proper reason before you murder somebody. We have a good reason here to kill this person. And so then all of a sudden it really just becomes a debate as to how justified the killing is. That's why I am hesitant to engage in the legal, things, except for as it would prevent someone from being killed, but as a sort of like a moral critique, like that is irrelevant, because that's just sort of engaging in what the state is engaging in, which is that we have a good reason to kill this person.
Right. I mean, that conversation was necessary in order to save Brandon's life.
Yes, agreed. Totally.
And we didn't. And the Supreme Court upheld it. The pro-life Amy Coney Barrett upheld the execution, and he was executed minutes later. And so seeing him as this thoughtful, dignified human being, despite his circumstances and all of what he was, making out of his life, it maybe sheds a light on how barbaric this process is for somebody who might not be inclined to oppose the death penalty. But that's where that ends, because you can't feed into the framing. It's unjust to murder anybody. It doesn't matter if it's a terrorist, and it doesn't matter if it's someone like Brandon, who was clearly, in my view, a good person. And so it's the sanitizing of the murder that bothers me most. How apparently he had to be injected with a sedative to calm down, and then they kill them by lethal injection, but they still feel the pain, even though they're sedated. And yet, somehow, to people who want to be removed from the blood of murder, who don't want to see the images of murder, they get to justify it in their mind. It's this cognitive dissonance. But it's actually more barbaric to me, and even in that way, because it's premeditated, as Sam said, it's state sanctioned, and it's this attempt to remove the realities of murder from the murder. And that just makes us a more murderous, a more violent society, because we're not truly reckoning with what we're doing. And as Sister Helen Prajin, I think her last name has put it, I mean, I think we have the tweet just about how this is a murder of poor people. This is what this is. I saw on Twitter today that Dylan Roof was trending, and not that I don't know what his socioeconomic background is, but it's specifically the murder of poor Black and brown people. And we've been doing this as a society for a long time. It's a continuation of lynching. It's a continuation of all of the horrors that we've been doing since slavery. And so you have to look at it as on that spectrum to fully grasp the scope.
And how demented. And I want to say, like, I don't just reserve this judgment for Trump and Bill Barr. I mean, Bill Clinton proved his bona fides by ordering or not pardoning or staying the execution of a man who had an IQ, if I remember, like in the 60s or 70s, when he was running for president in 93. To prove his sort of bona fides as a law and order guy. But how demented do you have to be as a human being to say, we're going to lift this moratorium, we're going to get as many executions as we can over the course of these 6 months, 5 months, July to December. We're going to try and get 15 executions in, 3 a month if we can, knowing that Joe Biden, and knock on wood, I hope I'm right about this, I think I am, is going to come in and reinstitute the moratorium.
Yeah.
Like to what possible end? Possible end could
it's Barr being a zealot. I mean, I don't even think this is Trump. Like, Trump was ready to pardon Alice Johnson because Kim Kardashian came in and asked him to, right?
Like, somebody argued that it was going to be a valuable, electoral strategy, and somebody probably argued that with him on this too.
Well, I'm glad he did it, but at the same time, like, he is so concerned right now with election nonsense and trying to overturn the results of the election that he's just like, yeah, I'll let this zealot Bill Barr, very respected in lawyer circles, by the way, cram in as many murders as possible of a man who was barely 18 at the time and didn't actually commit the murder. Like, and the cognitive dissonance of the Supreme Court, where they make this, they uphold this, right? And they just say, well, it's our judicial duty, right? It's just, we're just abiding by our judicial philosophy. And somehow that removes them from allowing a murder to happen. Like, somehow that absolves you because you pretend to adhere to a judicial philosophy when you don't actually. And then you pretend to be a follower of Jesus and religious.
The funny part, you remember the Dianne Feinstein accusation of Amy Coney Barrett that you are filled with the dogma. That was in her first hearing as a federal judiciary. It was because of a law review article that Coney Barrett had written in the 90s, where she was taking to task Catholics who were ruling against capital punishment because they were adhering to a Catholic dogma too much. And she said those people whose Catholicism made them see capital punishment as wrong in every case should remove and recuse themselves from those cases, so that their perspective on that is not implicated when it comes to the question of whether they should support the capital punishment as a judge. Now, of course, that doesn't apply for her when it comes to being anti-choice, anti-abortion. But it is. You
mean pro-life, Sam?
Pro-life, yes, of course, pro-life. That's what it was.
But murder this man last night.
I mean, that is just the. But I just think the death penalty is barbarism, and it is completely. It is sending a mixed message to society. It is saying that murder's not necessarily wrong. It's just that you need to have a good reason for it. And then all of a sudden, it's like, well, one person's good reason is another person's not good reason.
Yeah, the state's good at finding reasons.